"You're not my real family anymore." Those words cut through me like broken glass. They came from my own daughter, Anna, on the night of her engagement party. She had just inherited $30 million, and suddenly the man who raised her wasn't good enough for the life she wanted. What Anna didn't realize was that her new fortune had rules. Rules she had just broken. And I'd been keeping a secret for 25 years that could change everything. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe. I'm Daniel Harper. Most folks in Los Angeles know me as a construction foreman. The guy who wears steel-toe boots, drives a dusty Ford truck, and comes home smelling like concrete. That's who I've let the world believe I am, even my daughter. But here's the truth. My boots, my calloused hands, and my worn truck have all been part of a mask. A mask I've worn for more than 2 decades. And the night Anna decided she was too good for me, I knew it was time to take the mask off. The signs were there long before the engagement party. 3 years ago, at her wedding, Anna sat me with the catering staff instead of the family table. When I asked her why, she smiled politely and said, "Dad, you'll feel more comfortable with people who understand your lifestyle." My lifestyle. That's what she called it. As if honest work was something to be ashamed of. It stung, but I let it go. The following Christmas, Anna apologized to her new in-laws because of my rough hands when I passed the turkey platter. She laughed and said, "Dad spent his life pouring concrete. You can tell just by looking at him." Everyone chuckled politely. I pretended not to notice, but deep down, I did. Things spiraled when Anna married into Beverly Hills money. Her husband, Michael Sterling, came from old money. Hotel chains, yachts, the kind of wealth that doesn't blink at $20,000 wine bottles. Soon, Anna was shopping in boutiques where a single dress cost more than I made in a month. She traded in her modest apartment to a Beverly Hills penthouse. Overnight, my daughter decided that the man who raised her, the man who cooked her meals, patched up her scraped knees, and worked overtime to pay for her college, was suddenly a liability to her new image. And then last year came the inheritance. $25 million in trust funds, $5 million in immediate cash. Money that transformed her into one of the wealthiest young women in Los Angeles. But there was fine print. There always is. Anna had to donate $500,000 every year to charity. She had to submit annual reports proving where her money went. And most importantly, she had to maintain respectful and supportive relationships with surviving family. That last part, it wasn't just fluff. It was ironclad. The inheritance came from her mother's side, my late wife, Catherine. What Anna never knew was that Catherine's family had deep, old Philadelphia money, generations of it. They had lived through the Great Depression and made it through with their values intact. Catherine's grandmother, Eleanor Morrison, drafted the will herself back in 2009, and she wrote it with a steel spine. To Eleanor, money was worthless without family. She made sure her descendants would never forget that. Which is why Anna's inheritance could vanish the second she disrespected me publicly. And she had. Over and over again. But at the time, she didn't know that I've been keeping records. Every insult, every slight. Every time she introduced me as the help. I had text messages, photos, even audio recordings. Her mother's attorney, Margaret Sloan, told me years ago, "Daniel, if Anna ever forgets where she comes from, call me." I kept her card in my wallet for 6 years. And after Anna invited me to a lunch at the Beverly Hills Country Club, where she handed me the business card of an image consultant and told me to pretend I was retired instead of a construction worker, I finally made that call. Mr. Harper, Margaret said when she saw the evidence I'd collected, this isn't just a bad attitude, it's a pattern of humiliation. The committee won't ignore it. I stared at her across the mahogany desk in her office. What happens if we move forward? She folded her hands. If the committee rules that Anna violated the respect clauses, her entire inheritance is revoked. Every penny. It reverts to the foundation. My chest tightened. $30 million. Gone. Is there any way to stop it? I asked. Yes. She has one final chance. If she publicly acknowledges her respect for you within 72 hours of being notified, the case is closed. 72 hours. One last chance from my daughter to put family over image. I agreed. And the test came at her engagement party. 200 guests, all of Beverly Hills society in one ballroom. Either Anna would prove she valued family, or she'd lose everything. The night of the party, I polished my best boots, ironed a white button-up shirt, and walked into the Beverly Hills Country Club like a soldier walking into battle. Anna spotted me at the entrance. She wore a $10,000 Oscar de la Renta gown. Her smile was rehearsed. Her hug was cold. "Dad, you came," she whispered, already scanning the room behind me. "Of course I came," I said. "You're my daughter." She exhaled, her jaw tightened. "We need to talk, before you meet anyone important." She pulled me toward a quiet corner away from the chandeliers and champagne glasses. "Dad, listen, this night is critical. These people are Michael's world. The Ashworths, the Parkers, they're the ones who decide who belongs and who doesn't. I need you to present yourself differently." Differently how? She handed me a sleek card. Sarah Mitchell, image consultant, $500 per session. "Dad, just say you're retired or that you work in development. Something professional, please." I handed the card back. "Anna, I'm a construction foreman. I manage projects worth millions. I supervise 50 men at a time. That is professional." Her eyes flicked nervously to the ballroom. "That's not what they'll hear." "What will they hear?" She swallowed. "They'll hear blue collar, not our kind of people." Our kind of people. That was the moment I knew. This wasn't about money. It wasn't about image. It was about respect. And my daughter didn't have any left for me. Just then, Richard and Caroline Ashworth approached me, the wealthiest couple in the room. Richard extended his hand to me with a polite smile and asked the question that would determine Anna's fate. "So, Mr. Harper, what line of work are you in?" But little did Emma know, her father had been preparing for this day for years. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe. Emma stormed out of her father's office that afternoon, her heels clicking hard against the tiled floor, her face flushed with anger. "Why does he always talk down to me like I'm still a kid?" she muttered, gripping her purse tightly. At that very moment, George sat back in his worn leather chair, his eyes heavy with sorrow. He loved his daughter deeply, more than words could ever capture, but the harshness in her tone had pierced him. His longtime friend and attorney, Mr. Carter, happened to be waiting in the next room. When George finally emerged, Carter could see the pain written all over his face. "She doesn't understand," George said softly, shaking his head. "She thinks I'm just some old man clinging to outdated values, but one day she'll learn." Carter gave a sympathetic nod. "George, you've built an empire in silence. You've given her everything she ever asked for, without showing her where it came from. Maybe it's time she sees the truth. George leaned forward, his voice almost a whisper. Not yet. Let her think I have nothing. Let her think she's above me. Only then will the lesson mean something. That week, Emma carried her resentment into every corner of her life. At brunch with friends, she complained loudly about her father. He just doesn't get it. He's stuck in the past, and when the time comes, everything he owns will be mine anyway, she bragged, twirling her mimosa glass. Her friends exchanged uneasy glances, but no one dared to correct her. After all, Emma had always been the one who assumed the world revolved around her. What she didn't know, what she couldn't even imagine, was that her father had already rewritten his will. The ink had dried weeks ago, and her name? It wasn't on it. Back at home, George sat alone at the dinner table, staring at the chair where his daughter used to sit as a child. Memories of her laughter filled the room. He whispered into the silence, "Emma, if only you could see beyond the money, beyond yourself." That night, he opened an old wooden box in his study. Inside were photographs, letters, and the will, sealed and ready. He ran his hand across the envelope, his heart heavy but resolute. Meanwhile, Emma's confidence only grew. She started spending recklessly, opening credit lines she couldn't afford, convinced that soon it would all be paid off by her inheritance. Why worry, she told herself. Dad can't live forever, and when he's gone, everything comes to me. But life was about to deal her a reality she never saw coming. Because the day George passed, the truth would shatter everything she thought she knew. And when the lawyer finally stood before Emma, holding that will in his hand, the room went silent because the name inside was not hers. The moment the will was opened, Emma's world crumbled in ways she never imagined. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe. The day of George's passing was quiet, almost too quiet. The house that once echoed with warmth and conversation now felt like a hollow shell. Emma arrived in a black designer dress, sunglasses covering her eyes, not to hide tears, but to mask her impatience. She wanted this over with. In the front parlor, close friends, neighbors, and George's lawyer, Mr. Carter, gathered in respectful silence. The smell of polished wood and fresh flowers filled the air. Emma stood apart, her arms crossed. To her, this wasn't about grief. It was about the future she was certain awaited her. Finally, Mr. Carter cleared his throat and pulled a sealed envelope from his briefcase. The room hushed. Emma leaned forward, her lips curling into a faint, victorious smile. "Let's get this over with," she muttered under her breath. Carter adjusted his glasses, unfolding the papers with deliberate care. His voice was steady, formal. "This is the last will and testament of George Whittaker." Emma's pulse quickened. She could already picture herself holding the keys to everything. Carter continued, "To my dear daughter Emma." She smirked, waiting for the words she thought were coming. "I leave a single item, a box." Her head jerked up. "What?" she blurted, startling the room. Carter looked at her calmly, then pressed on. "The remainder of my estate, including assets, properties, and holdings, I leave in trust to the Whittaker Foundation." The room gasped. Emma's face drained of color. "A foundation?" she stammered, her voice trembling. "That can't be right. He's my only daughter." But Carter only shook his head. "Your father was very clear in his instructions. He wanted his wealth to serve others, not entitlement." Emma rose to her feet, her voice sharp. "This is a mistake. He wouldn't do this to me. He wouldn't." But Carter calmly handed her a small wooden box, the very one George had cherished in his study. "This," he said, "is what he left for you. He wanted you to have it and to understand." Her hands shook as she clutched the box, fury burning in her chest. "What kind of cruel joke is this?" she spat, storming out of the room. Behind her, the mourners whispered in hushed tones. But George's closest friends knew. This had been his plan all along. That night, Emma sat alone in her apartment, staring at the wooden box. She wanted to throw it away, to smash it against the wall, but something stopped her. Slowly, she opened it. Inside were photographs of her as a child. Her first bike, her school recital, a picture of her asleep on George's chest when she was just a baby. And beneath the photos, a letter. Her father's handwriting was unmistakable. Emma unfolded the paper, her eyes scanning the words. "My dearest Emma, if you are reading this, then I am gone. You may feel angry, betrayed, perhaps even unloved. But the truth is, I loved you more than life itself. My wealth was never meant to be your crutch. It was meant to build, to heal, to serve. I left you this box because in it lies something money can never buy. Memories of a bond that was once unbreakable. If you can find your way back to that girl in these photos, then you will have found more riches than I could have ever given you." Her hands trembled. For the first time in years, tears welled in her eyes. And just when she thought she had lost everything, Eva realized her father had left her something far more valuable than she ever expected. But would she recognize it in time? She thought her life was over, but the truth was, her journey had just begun. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe. Emma sat on the edge of her bed that night, clutching her father's letter. The words played over and over in her mind. If you can find your way back to that girl in these photos, for the first time in years, she felt small, not the powerful, untouchable woman she pretended to be in front of her friends, but the daughter who once laughed on her father's shoulders, believing he was the strongest man in the world. She whispered into the empty room, her voice breaking. "Why didn't I listen, Dad?" But life didn't pause for her grief. Within weeks, the reality of her reckless choices came crashing down. Credit card bills piled high. Collectors started calling. She couldn't keep up the lifestyle she had built on the assumption of inheriting millions. The friends who once sipped champagne with her at brunch slowly disappeared. Invitations stopped coming. Her calls went unanswered. One night, as she sat alone in her apartment, lights dimmed to save on electricity, she realized something devastating. She had nobody left. Nobody but the father she had taken for granted, and he was gone. Meanwhile, the Whitaker Foundation was making headlines. News outlets praised George's legacy, his secret generosity, his vast wealth quietly funneled into hospitals, schools, and shelters. Emma watched the coverage in silence, her chest tightening. The man she dismissed as out of touch had changed countless lives behind the scenes, and she had never even known. Days turned into weeks. The wooden box remained on her nightstand, almost haunting her. She opened it again and again, staring at the photos. One picture, her holding her father's hand at the county fair, cotton candy in her other hand, struck her hardest. She remembered the sound of his laugh, the warmth of his grip. Tears streamed down her face. For the first time, she wasn't crying over what she lost materially. She was crying over the love she had thrown away. The following Sunday, Emma did something she hadn't done in years. She walked into her father's old church, the same small building where George had volunteered every weekend. Heads turned as she entered. Some looked at her with pity, others with quiet judgment. But the pastor simply smiled gently and said, "Welcome home, Emma." She sat in the back pew, clutching the letter in her pocket. And as the choir sang, she felt a strange peace, as though her father was beside her again. That night, she made a decision. If her father had spent his life giving, maybe it was time she tried the same. It wasn't easy. At first, she was met with suspicion. When she offered to help at the shelter her father supported, volunteers whispered, "That's George's daughter, the one who expected everything." But Emma didn't run this time. She stayed. She worked. She scrubbed floors, served meals, folded blankets. Slowly, the whispers faded, replaced by nods of quiet respect. Yet even as she tried to change, a shadow lingered. Every time she passed the foundation's office, she thought about the fortune that slipped through her fingers. Part of her still ached, still wondered, why wasn't I enough? Why didn't he trust me? And deep down, she feared she'd never truly earn back what she lost. Not the money, but her father's pride. But one evening, as Emma was locking up the shelter, a familiar face appeared at the door with news that could change everything she thought she knew about her father's final gift. She thought the story was over, but her father had one last surprise waiting for her. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe. Emma was sweeping the shelter floor late one evening when she heard a soft knock at the door. She looked up, startled. Standing there was Mr. Carter, her father's old attorney, holding a leather folder under his arm. His expression was calm, but there was something in his eyes, a weight, as though he carried unfinished business. "Mr. Carter?" Emma asked cautiously. "What are you doing here?" He stepped inside, removing his hat. "Emma, your father asked me to deliver something, but only when I felt the time was right." Her heart skipped. "What do you mean? I thought everything was settled." Carter nodded slowly. "It was, but George knew you better than anyone. He suspected that grief alone wouldn't change you. He wanted proof. Proof that you could walk a different path." Emma's grip on the broom tightened. "And did I?" Carter smiled faintly. "That's why I'm here." He set the folder on the shelter's wooden table and slid it toward her. With trembling fingers, Emma opened it. Inside were deeds, property titles, bank accounts, investment accounts. Her eyes widened. "What is this?" Carter cleared his throat. "A portion of your father's wealth, not the whole estate. He made sure the foundation would always stand, but enough to secure your future. He wrote in his instructions that this would only be given if I saw with my own eyes that you had embraced humility, responsibility, and service." Emma's knees felt weak. She sank into the nearest chair, staring at the documents. Her voice broke. "So, he didn't cut me out completely?" "No," Carter said softly. "He never stopped loving you. He just wanted to make sure that love didn't destroy you." Emma's tears spilled freely now, landing on the papers. She whispered, almost to herself, "Dad, you still believed in me." Carter placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "He always did." From that day forward, Emma's life changed, not in the way she once imagined, but in a way far more meaningful. She no longer flaunted wealth. She no longer sought attention or approval. Instead, she poured herself into the work her father had started. She expanded the shelter, funded scholarships, and built programs for struggling families. People who once doubted her began to see the change was real. And though she would always carry regret for the years lost with her father, she also carried his spirit with her through every meal served, every hand she held, every life she touched. Years later, standing in front of a new wing of the Whittaker Foundation building, Emma addressed a crowd. My father once told me that real wealth isn't what we keep, it's what we give. I didn't understand that at first. I thought money was everything. But now I see the greatest inheritance he left me wasn't in dollars or deeds, it was in the chance to become better than I was. The audience erupted in applause, but Emma's eyes lifted toward the sky. For a brief moment, she swore she could feel her father's presence beside her, smiling with pride. And so, the daughter who once believed she had lost everything discovered she had gained far more than she ever imagined, the chance to live not for herself, but for the legacy of love her father left behind.